Welcome to Happy Times and Places. A lot of good people are going to die today, but don't worry, I, Toby Haydock, I'm going to keep things positive, because that's what this is all about. Choosing the best things about a chosen episode of Doctor Who, and seeing if my thoughts concur with my special guests.
My name's Ed Stradling, and I'm a factual TV producer who's done a lot of work on the DVDs of Doctor Who. So I've chosen Resurrection of the Daleks. It probably isn't one of my very favourite serials, which I think is slightly underrated in recent years. I think it was probably correctly rated in its first few years as being a very good serial, perhaps not one of the very best.
Well, hello everybody. Or, go, it's you. I hate everything. Sorry, I'm trying to be in Eric Saward's world. Well, greetings. It's episode 2 of Resurrection of the Daleks. A reminder that I'm watching these as the BBC decreed back in the day, the broadcast version of this story, which is 2 episodes long, 2 feature-length episodes long, which is annoying for me because obviously if I do 4 episodes, that fits me in 4 25-minute episodes. That still gives me 4 podcast slots and enables me to relax and go on holiday and sip a pina colada on the beach. But instead I'm doing this as 2, which only fits 2 slots. They're longer, but it doesn't make any difference because it still counts as 1 slot, which is kind of what it was all about back in the day because of scheduling, because of the Olympics. It meant it was easier for them to fill 2 longer slots than 4 shorter ones. So there we go. So it's always felt a bit filmic, this to me, and the contents as well. Can you imagine if Planet of Fire was 2 50-minute episodes? Oh, dearie me. It's the fact that it's the Dalek story of the year, and it's the one where, there's death upon death is piled on. It does seem to fit the extended episodes a bit better. So let's see how we do with my lovely friend Ed Stradling, who I don't see enough, but with whom I've spent many an exciting time in Doctor Who events and beyond, and professional times as well. But let's see how we're going to do as we press play in 3, 2, 1. So here we go. It's a Resurrection of the Daleks. Continuing the theme of Genesis, then Destiny. I suppose if the classic series had gone on, they would have had to have got increasingly desperate in their choices of biblical names to choose. I still think, Remembrance is an appropriate name, I suppose, because it's something that they left behind. It's just not a word that is really bandied about in everyday conversation, is it? Anyway, that's okay. Yeah, so there is a sort of ceiling thing going on with this in this Dalek spaceship. I always think in things set in spaceships these days, I don't think you could ever land on an alien spaceship or space station without some sort of alarm going off. Do you know what I mean? It does seem to be a sort of place where you can turn up and wander around and there's no security cameras and nobody picks you up. You'd have to be more artful in the way that you deployed your characters these days, I think. So we've got the twist that Stein is a Dalek agent. So, see, this is where I'm sure somebody told me once that the end of the episode was the exterminate, and it's it was stopped by the interruption of Lytton. Although that's a wonderfully cliched Doctor Who get out of that, isn't it? Kill. No, wait, we need to do XYZ first. Oh, that's an interesting shot. The Dalek going straight up to the camera. Anyway, yeah, Stein being a Dalek I've never really noticed that before. That's an interesting move, unusual that it sort of goes to the side and goes right up to the camera to do its business, and then we cut away from it and see what's going on here. Stein but when he was on his own, he looked sort of rather worried and fretful, and was sort of still playing the part. And maybe he's a method agent. Maybe he's a Stanislavski. Maybe, but it does seem to sort of not quite make sense of the twists. Of course, have to be a shock. I quite like the way that she goes again. Again, it's very kind of Saywoody, and on paper, Tolo's question is annoying companion speak, and so actually to respond in that way is quite good. Although Mark Strickson's very good at all of that sort of stuff. Lovely Del. Chloe Ashcroft, who actually doesn't look quite like she did in Play School. Ambulance. I can never get over the way she says ambulance. But she didn't wear glasses, I don't think, when she was in Play School. Yeah, it was a mistake to give him his give the duplicate his gun, seeing as he'd made a point of leaving it for the Doctor. But that is televisual shorthand, isn't it? For we've programmed our androids or whatever the duplicates are badly. It does pile on quite a few plots, doesn't it? Oh, there they are. So that's all our nice characters dead. So they've. So I suppose Del and Philip and everybody would have had to come into that set just to do that, and not got all their stuff done on the days that they're filming in here. Yeah, of course they do. So the duplicates actually don't get them very far, having them as the soldiers. They're kind of given away almost immediately, but that's okay. It's a way of saving actors, isn't it, and still keeping up the jeopardy. Oh yes, and this is sort of. You I always think this is a bit sad for these two Daleks, but of course, that's the nature of them. They're not sentimental about individuals. A ship with a self-destruct. I always thought, I went through a phase of thinking, that's silly. Why would you have a self-destruct? But of course, it's a perfectly reasonable thing. You scuttle a ship, don't you, in the sea if you've been overtaken by pirates, or if you've got a cargo you don't want to. There is a reason to sort of. But if there's no escape sort of thing, to take yourself down and take the buggers with you. So I used to sort of mock the idea of a self-destruct thing. Why have we got this thing that's sole purpose is to be hijacked and used to overcome us? But actually, it's more defensive than that, isn't it? But it is also a bit of a sci-fi cliche, isn't it? The old self-destruct system. Look, he's got an earring. I do quite like that. I know lots of people have earrings these days, but in the 80s it was I remember the old schoolyard thing of going, if you've got an earring in a particular ear, it means you're gay. And I would sort of go, how does that work? Do you become gay if they pierce that ear, or will they somehow refuse to pierce the ear of somebody who goes into the ear piercing place and doesn't have a gay certificate? But of course, it was just a silly schoolyard thing, as a comic friend of mine said. Well, no, I don't think I can do that joke. It's before the watershed, but it's basically where I come from. If you're gay, it's because you've, and then says something a bit gayer than having an earring. But there we go. It's amazing how being gay was was a sort of schoolyard slur, wasn't it? I think that was turning around even when I was at school, though, because I remember saying, well, if I am gay, it's not an insult, is it? And if you're not gay, if I'm not gay, well, you're just wrong. Did one of those bodies move behind them then? So I remember us even rejecting it then, but it still, it was still bandied about, and at university I remember, people would still sort of say that's a bit gay or whatever. Oh, they do it in Aliens of London, don't they? But things have changed, and that's okay. That's, words, words that have ramifications and connotations for people get eased out of the language or reappropriated or whatever. Anyway, let's not get into all of that. Why did I start talking? Oh, it's because an earring. It's because an earring meant you were gay. I mean, it's simple stuff, isn't it? Yay, well done, Del. There's nothing else to say about Del, really, other than I really like the change he makes from, affable, slightly avuncular soldier type to cold killer. Yes, this guy, he doesn't get any lines, does he? But he gets quite a lot to do. I seem to recall he does quite a shocked look on his face. He's the chemist, isn't he? I think Leslie Grantham does look very good with his slick back hair, and you can see why he got cast later as, yes, he does. Oh, yes, he got cast later as Dirty Den in EastEnders, and had various ups and downs with his career. Now, Lindsay Turner, she's the crew lady. She's called Xena, but she just gets credited as crew member. I think, again, you sort of say, can I get credited as Xena, not crew member? But she, I think I saw her interviewed in Doctor Who magazine for a very small little cutout interview. We actually I did find her for Ed when we were considering that documentary, but again, he went slightly higher up the cast list for his for his documentary. So yeah, these guys are slightly stuffed, really. Styles, she's not going to style it out. There's a lot of bubble wrap, isn't there, in the Dalek? It's nice that they've given Doctor something comfortable to lie on. So I think it's very well directed, this story. It does pile plot after plot after plot, doesn't it? We've got the duplicates going to Gallifrey to assassinate the High Council. So we've got haven't we got Tegan and Turlo are in the cupboards here, aren't they? I'm still not quite sure how the duplicates work or what they are. The speed with which the soldiers in the warehouse got duplicated was astonishing. So they're a product of the genetic engineering. So what happened to the original? So it seems an odd thing to do. So you make another one of a person, but it does have that person's thoughts and memories and blah de blah de blah. In which case you say, well, why don't you just take over the actual person? Because if it's just a piece of genetic engineering which makes another person, and if it's not a person, what's the advantage of it not being a person? I don't quite get it, but it does make for that nice thing of going, well, we've got scarier versions of characters that we liked, but it's not hugely clear, is it? I don't think it matters. I don't think it's a problem. I'm just musing on it because, as I say, I've never quite got to grips with the mechanics of it, if you like. The logic of it is slightly unfair to say because I don't think it really matters. What we know is there are, the duplicates have vestiges of the actual person, which can be appealed to if they're like Stein, and the duplicates are also scarier versions of people that we did know and like Sergeant Calder and Colonel Archer. We attack on. I always admire the optimism of they mined the corridor. It's not even a corridor. We attack on two fronts, i.e. this door here and this panel a hand span away. You can imagine when you're writing that, I suspect what what Saward might have conjured in his head was a slightly larger battleground. But this is a good set. It's nicely lit, and all of this fluid camera work. Oh no, he doesn't tell you how it's done. See the Dalek. I mean, I can see why. I mean, it looks quite fun with that trooper next to the Dalek with his Dalek gun hat. But I can see why. I just don't go. So here's Tegan and Turlough. Because we're now going to have the big revelation that sort of goes nowhere. He's very good, Mark Strickson, even when he's sort of lying zombie-like. He's. I remember when Planet of Fire was on. I remember thinking, I'm sure we saw his arm in Resurrection of the Daleks, and he didn't have the triangle. But you don't really, do you? Oh, he's very good at that sort of thing, Davison. I mean, he's lying there. He can't move his head much. And he has to shout no, which can be quite pony when you do it. He's really good at that sort of things. I don't think I've mentioned Davison much with this. I think Davison is superb. He never does a duff moment, actually, as the Doctor. And I think Mark Strickson is brilliant. He's, even though he's now on the side of the Angels, we know he's not trying to kill the Doctor anymore. He has that, he's got that great sort of conspiratorial whisper thing that he does, which is sort of often dripping with irony or, dourness. He's a great character, Turlough, and I think Mark Strickson plays him really well. I think he keeps it interesting. I think he's got a wonderful enigmatic quality about him, which Mark Strickson in real life, who I have done things with, but I don't know particularly well. But he's actually much more sort of expressive and cheery, and he's sort of he's less mysterious, really. I guess he's playing mysterious, of course he is. But I think the decision to do what they did with Turlough makes for a much more interesting dynamic in the TARDIS, and I think could have been sustained a little bit longer. Actually, that you've got this slightly shifty character, but it certainly works, and I think is an underrated element of 80s Who. Actually, Turlough, the fact that they go, how do we make the TARDIS dynamic more interesting? I would very much like a thing in my chair that you just inject people with that makes them do as they tell you. I mean, I suppose if he'd stayed there long enough, he could have eventually converted everybody. Lovely shot there. This, and look at that broken glass, and everything there is really good. Oh, and I like the lighting in here. I like the fact that the bit where the Supreme Dalek lives, and I think it's quite small because everything in here is filmed relatively close, but it's a differentiated lighting, and of course the Supreme Dalek means that the whole thing has a slightly different color scheme because of his different get up. So that's, I like those little cutaways to there. I think this is one of the least successful scenes in the whole thing. Poor old Chloe Ashcroft having to act, whatever discombobulation occurs because of because the dematerialization of the Magellan virus. But it's not one of the more successful scenes, I would say. But it's so hard to do that sort of stuff, and especially when you're limited in your camera angles and you get a chance to do it once and all of that. But all of that, so that kind of, you will go to Gallifrey. It's sort of like, I think it's getting to the point in the series now, you think, well, if we mention something from the continuity, that is somehow more important. So we'll mention Gallifrey, and Davison will do a flawless no, and it will fit. And I remember when I saw it, not the first time, but when I got it on video and saw it again, going, oh, I'd forgotten about that. But yeah, that's really exciting. But it's actually not that exciting. And he's doing his best here, Rodney Bewes, but it's a really hard ask, and it doesn't quite work. It's not great, but what can you do with that? Especially when you have his sort of slightly flat vocal tone. All of this stuff is great. Look how wonderfully shot this is. And even though it looks quite a reasonable day there with the sun shining, it's, the brickwork, the film stock. It's this film stock that seems to have, lend something a much more grown-up atmosphere. It's because the programs made on film tended to be the grown-up ones, but it leads to that. Even though it's outside and they're quite big open spaces, it gives it a sort of grim urban feel, sort of back streets and dodgy corners and all of that, even though again it's quite open. Oh yeah, he's gonna. Oh yes, one of these. I think the man with the moustache here is a very 80s looking man. He could easily be behind somebody performing on Top of the Pops in a. I imagine him sort of, with just a leather waistcoat on, doing some thumb dancing. Oh dear. Oh, she has to do the screaming stuff now as well, doesn't she? Yeah, I mean, she's not doing anything wrong there, but again, it just doesn't quite work. I remember that's one I said, because I think I remember when I watched this as a kid. It was all pretty full on grim, pretty flawless, and then when I came to revisit it when I was a bit older, some of it frayed slightly around the edges because there are some moments that don't quite work. But I'm now more generously inclined towards it. I remember thinking, my brother coming in and watching this bit, and me thinking, oh, he's going to love this because it's pretty grim, because she's running from policemen with silencers. It's beautifully filmed. Look at the angle on that. This is pretty deadly. And they're going to kill this innocent bystander, and you think, oh, this is an amazing, that's really grim. And my brother just went, why was he doing metal detecting in the water? And I was like, that didn't even occur to me to be a thing that you would criticise. I think that is the difference between people who watch telly in the way that I, and I'm sure a lot of you, watch the telly, people that watch. I mean, surely it takes an effort to sort of to always be on the lookout to go, well, why do they do that? I mean, you sort of go, well, I could sort of, I know what I sort of think is important to the storytelling, and I might question something that is a flaw in the logic of the main thrust of the storytelling, but it's like looking at a Christmas tree and going, well, why is the wiring of the lights like that? I mean, I don't know. That's not a very good. That's actually really well. No, it is. It's like looking at anything, sort of beautiful and wonderful. I'm not saying Resurrection of the Daleks is beautiful and wonderful, but you know what I mean. And sort of trying to question the mechanics of it. It's taking your eye off the ball. It really is. So this is pretty grim. This is the second build guest star. I like the fact that lovely Xena gets to be the last survivor, who you think, oh, is she going to get to do it? Because again, in a more traditional way of doing it, you might have got Rula Lenska to be the one who nearly, who's the last one to pull the thing, but she gets killed as soon as they smash the door open. So that's your second build guest star gone. Which is pretty short-lived of old Ruler, who's now being dragged out. Ruler, who has actually spent the night in this house, in the room directly above me. I might have mentioned that last time, because there was a football match going on, and she couldn't get a room in Manchester, so she came to stay at ours. She's a very, very classy lady. It's funny because I'd already interviewed her. Oh yeah, this is grim as well. It's almost like they're going. It's unfortunate that she's had to do that screaming for the part, in the previous scene. It's sort of like, she's got now to do anything else. But actually, I love the sort of very casual way Del just sort of pulls his gun out and, without much ceremony. He doesn't bother. He doesn't enjoy it. He doesn't dwell on it. He just rather coldly dispatches her. So this is where we please the Doctor Who fans by showing old clips. This was the sort of stuff where, oh man, this is amazing. It's automatically a cut above the other Doctor Who stories this season because it's got a clip from old Doctor Who in it. Despite the best acting of the chemist extra there, that needle was not in that capsule. Anyway, I'm sure I lost track of something that I was talking about there. Rulenska? No, I think I've. Oh yeah, no, I'd met her. I'd interviewed her for Who's Round, and she'd sort of left Corrie by then, but then she came back in, and I'm still not entirely sure she knows if I'm the guy that interviewed her for Who's Round and has met her at another Doctor Who thing or two is the same guy who's Shirley's partner. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure she knows that because she's met me under two sets of entirely different circumstances on more than one occasion. But it's never like I've walked out of a Doctor Who convention with her and and talked to Cheryl Lee. Do you know what I mean? So we've been she's been doing a day on Coronation Street and then come into a Doctor Who thing. So she might think there are two people who she's met who look quite similar. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Now that Davros monologue, I remember. In fact, I think it was this episode, or certainly episode 3, on my bootleg VHS that didn't have any sound effects or music. So, and the cliffhanger to it, that again must have been artificially inserted, was he's got lots of fillings, hasn't he, Peter Davison? This is not one of Doctor Who's finest hours. Oh, I feel sorry for Rodney Bewes there. It can't be an impossible task. I'm sure there are some actors that could have pulled that off, but I'm afraid Rodney Bewes is not one of them. And I don't think he gives a sort of bad performance throughout, but I think certain things are beyond him. But yes, that Davros, once more my Daleks shall become the supreme beings. It's really odd watching it without the music, and it just goes to show how important some of that stuff, music and sound effects are when you watch an edit of a Doctor Who without the ambience or the punctuation given to it by music, particularly electronic music. I think in the 80s when the sets can sound sort of wooden or clunky or and don't have that sort of metallic clang or that depth of sound that a real building or room and environment does. That's an excellent set. I love the fact that he has to duck everywhere because it's a Dalek environment. It really does expose stuff when that music and those sound effects are stripped away. And that Davros climax, I mean, it's an odd one to have as a cliffhanger anyway, because it's like, oh, I've run out of 25 minutes. I just need Davros to shout now. Oh no, maybe that was the cliffhanger. Because I'm watching I keep going, when's the actual episode going to finish? That is the cliffhanger, isn't it? See, this is the problem, because I've seen this in so many different ways. I had this version first, the 2-parter, the off-air. No, that's what I watched first, but my first collected version of it was this Australian edit that certainly had the wrong episode 1 cliffhanger, release Davros. And then I thought maybe that the Davros monologue was an artificially inserted one, but it is actually the cliffhanger. Anyway, let's not get it. I love this bit, not because I think the Doctor should kill anybody, but because I think Davison absolutely sells it. It's a moment that doesn't go anywhere as it comes to it, but I think Saward is wrong in his understanding of the Doctor, and in fact in Saward's script, he shoots one of the guards. I remember talking to Saward about this because I was at the commentary, and I think somebody else had the script and said, look what it says here, and Saward goes, well, the Doctor is in violent situations, and sometimes in violent situations you have to be violent. I don't think gunning down a guard from behind or whatever is not, I think the Doctor taking a life when his own is threatened or under terrible circumstances or whatever, I probably wouldn't lose an awful lot of sleep about, but just offing some poor henchman, I'm not exactly sure is the Doctor's style. And now this is where I always get a bit bored when baddies turn on each other, but the whole setup of this is Davros and the Daleks working sort of counter to each other, and who's loyal to whom, and whether they need him or not. So, but they tell him to kill. They tell Lytton to kill Davros, don't they? And then they say, "Now we'll kill Lytton because we don't need him anymore." And if you do too much of that, it makes you go, "Well, why would anybody ally themselves with them anyway?" But I suppose the Daleks have to be deadly. But then it undermines the people anyway. I always think it feels a little unimaginative to me. It's like 24 used to do it, where you get a good baddie and they go, well, they've been in 6 or 7 episodes. We need a baddie now, so we'll get a new baddie who'll just off the old baddie. I think Davison does this really, really well, and I actually really like it because, although in Saward's version the Doctor is a bit more casual in his dispensing of other people, and actually not having that makes this hit harder. If you've just seen him zap a guard, you go, well, he doesn't think twice about taking a life. Whereas because it's the Doctor who doesn't, which is precisely the reason that the Doctor shouldn't be violent and directly take life elsewhere, because then if you want a moment like this to really land, and the get out of it, where he's perhaps almost too keen to believe Davros, but that means that he will then not do the thing that he thought he was going to do, which then opens up sort of things going, well, should the Doctor have more of the courage of his convictions and save a lot of lives by taking a life? I mean, this is all interesting stuff, which I do not accept. I think Davison is excellent in this. I like that face-off. I like the whole build-up to this moment. I wouldn't know what to do with an army. It's very good because at the and I love the way that Terry uses his hand to sort of shrink back. It's very, very good. I think that whole sequence is very strong and may well be one of my favorited things. I am a great admirer also of camera tilt, grab the console, acting and camera work. It's a wonderful thing. And I like the way that Davros isn't craven and doesn't sort of beg for his life, but goes, "Come on, mate. If you were a real man, you'd have taken me down by now." And I think all of that does open up. Davros is quite right to an extent. Is it actually the more moral thing to do to do a thing that is beyond your values, taking a life, if it is for the greater good, but that you have to do it? I always felt that this was slightly. I remember at the time not being quite sure. Oh, that wall crumbled a bit behind him, but they are walls that seem a bit sort of jerry built and out of kits deliberately, so it's acceptable. Yeah, I think it's slightly botched, that, because we need there for the character development of Stein, we need him to drop his guard and mistake, well, not mistake, but sort of assert that troopers, his enemies, because he's now on the side of the Angels, are on his side. To which Mercer has to go to point out, no, they're the baddies, we're the goodies, which he has to say, even though you absolutely wouldn't under those circumstances. And then without the camera, because it was all one camera move, that he has to kill one of the guards. The guard then has to kill him, and then but Rodney Bewes needs to be injured as well. So it's a bit of a Reservoir Dogs who killed Nice Guy Eddie, because one of the troopers has to shoot Mercer and Stein, and then Stein has to kill that trooper, and Mercer has to die, but he's miles away because he's at the sort of back of shot, because the troopers have entered, and we've got Stein at the front, and it's not cutting away because there's only one camera on it, which means poor old Jim Findlay, who's played a fairly unlikable character very well, gets but who has managed to survive longer than some of the sort of bigger name guest stars. So good for him, and it's nice to see a prominent sort of hero role for an actor of color in Doctor Who at this time. So this is all good stuff, and he then gets this rather confusing death scene, and then Rodney Bewes has got all these lines about I caused Mercer's death, but he sort of flubs them slightly. His diction's not great on them. So poor old Mercer gets kind of offed in a rather unspectacular fashion, I would say. He's a very distinctive looking man, this chemist, with his red hair and his glasses. So it means that even though he doesn't have any lines, he is, you do follow him through the story. And here we have the who can die for the longest competition. I think Del and Philip McGough have been brilliant throughout this story, but I think they've had a little bit of a competition as to who can take the longest to die. So he has a Del gives it some there and does that sort of disco death. And Philip, it's I wonder if there's a bit there of kind of it's Doctor Who, lads. Should we give it a go? Because and obviously the director has sort of wanted it to go zap 1, zap 2, zap 3, and that's staged as well as it could be, actually, because again, lines like behind you sort of, it wants to slightly give the idea that somebody's out, they've been outflanked by the Dalek while they were concentrating their fire, but it's size is against them, and I actually think that was not done not too badly. In fact, if you compare this to, I always think that death scream of that man sounds a bit like a musical instrument. It's almost like it's an oboe or something, including Lytton and his troopers. So now they've turned on Lytton as well. But I actually think if you compare the warehouse battle to Warriors of the Deep, where everybody stands not very far from each other, and and little red glows are superimposed, and it's a bit static and a bit bright. I think there's a lot of camera movement. There's great use of the set. Oh, so it's a absolute bloody bloodbath, isn't it? But Leslie Grantham gets to nearly release the thing. So that's the end of Kiston. He's dead now. So there's the movement, extras dying all over the place. They've. I think Matthew Robinson has orchestrated the action very well, and it's quite nice to see Lytton live to fight another day. Even though he hasn't done that much, but he looks pretty cool in his police superintendent stuff. And Maurice Colborne is very good at the sort of cold villainy, and he's the sort of person you want in a show that can be a little bit campy at times. Somebody that's absolutely not messing about. I always appreciated those sorts of bad guys as a kid. That's not a sequence that's particularly stood the test of time. Let's state the obvious. because we have to say something, and we all look the same, so we need to differentiate ourselves for the viewers. And the lighting in here is very, very good. It is a really good set, this, actually. It's a shame Ed has chosen that, because John Anderson's done a magnificent job, and you really do feel that that's the inside of those Shad Thames buildings. I remember when we were filming the documentary, I had to materialise, didn't I, at the beginning, and I remember moving in too quickly and Ed almost going, well, that's it, that's the end of the documentary. And I was just like, well, should we just do the shot again? Because I think it was pointing up and it had sort of panned down, and I got impatient and moved it before he gave me the signal. And instead of going, no, go again, he got really sort of, because Ed is quite sort of focused and, dare I say it, a little spectrumy, but I think it's a common trait amongst the fans of Doctor Who, and I include myself in that. We all tend to get a little fixated and probably not process frustration particularly well. Look at that, boom. No tinsel, which is good. I think this final battle is extremely well orchestrated, actually. And again, look, he's got quite a lot of depth, and I quite like this bit where Lytton... that's the only interaction they have, isn't there? Oh, yes, says the Doctor in Attack of the Cybermen. Oh, yeah, I really misjudged that man, who the only time I met him was I was at the opposite end of a warehouse, and he tried to shoot me. But yes, I misjudged him. I'm still not sure he actually turns out to be that nice. But anyway, let's not get into this. Now, this is overdubbed, isn't it? If you watch Davros now, I don't think his lips move, because I think it was not clear what was happening in this scene. He, I think in the way that it was, I suppose you could say it's one of those rare instances of it's the character's thought in his head, which we don't have very often at all. We have it at the beginning of The Underwater Menace. The War Chief does it, has a moment in the War Games. But yes, that scene, Davros went and opened. Essentially, if it hadn't had that piece of ADR where he goes, "My escape pod is prepared, and now for the Daleks," it would have just been opening a door and then holding one of those things. So I mean, it's simple, isn't it? A bit of it's just a bit of squirty foam, but it does the job. It reminds me though of the Victor Lewis Smith Dalek sketch, which I'm surprised ever got through. It was very puerile. I liked Victor Lewis Smith. He was, but he could be quite puerile. If you've not seen the Victor Lewis Smith Daleks sketches, I mean, I'm not going to do it for you, but it's basically extremely childish. No, he tries to kill him twice, to be fair. So yes, he misjudges him based on 2 attempted murders this is very cool. I mean, so yeah, you didn't misjudge him, Doctor. He was an absolute prick. And it's very cool how he wipes his hat that he's just been carrying about with him, just in case. Always, when you're a galactic mercenary who is serving as the chief of the human troops of the marauding Dalek menace, just make sure you carry the hat part of your earthly disguise with you in case you need to make a sharp exit. I mean, it's fine, but it's very silly. And I remember being really worried here that, oh no, they can't kill Davros, but of course it's just affected his chair. It's fine. But and presumably, if we're to cut back to an hour and go, oh no, I'm all right, I could put my arm down now. But that's okay, because they do that, don't they? They lead you to believe that the villain is dead, so that then when he returns, it's a shock. And actually he's pretty cool in Revelation. Yeah, I quite like this, that you have the final bit where the Supreme Dalek survives for a start, but he sort of comes to taunt the Doctor. And they kind of leave it to go. Well, I suppose we're supposed to assume that the duplicates just kind of melt or get a stammer, or turn out not to be particularly good at acting in a turmoil. And people can spot them. But I quite like the negative ending where the Doctor doesn't entirely seem to, what victory he has is to sort of get out alive, essentially, and has no. But every guest character, bar Lytton, has bought the farm. Look at that. There we go. So even though it's sort of ended with the Supreme Dalek taunting the Doctor, I always sort of think that comes after the explosion, but of course it doesn't, because he's on the ship. So that Dalek that has just been taunting the Doctor has just been blown up. So there is a victory for the good guys, but it manages to make it feel like that the Doctor has not won 100%. And this is a really grim note, and I think those three guys look great. I love the murderous policeman thing. That's Saward at his sort of cynical, let's be disturbing, let's rock, let's again, I mentioned it last time, didn't I? Let's do that thing that they got in trouble for doing when my predecessors did it. And here we have Tegan's leaving scene, which I think is rather good. I think Janet Fielding is very good. I remember it felt very grown up. What she say? A lot of good people have died today, which is very, very true. And of course, if any of us lived in 10 minutes of a Doctor Who adventure, we'd have post-traumatic stress disorder for the rest of our lives. But I think it occasionally behoves the show to sort of say, this stuff that we take in our stride because it's an action adventure actually has a big emotional toll. I mean, again, I sort of think, if Maurice Colborne can carry his policeman's hat around with him even when he's doing battle, you would think Tegan would want to leave with a change of underpants, but no. She hasn't even got a coat. She hasn't even got a pair of tie. She's going to get very cold. She hasn't even got a bag. She's got nothing. Where's her? If she has got a purse or a wallet on her, it's not going to have space for much money. But there we go. I presumably, though, I suppose Auntie Vanessa's house will have shot up. If it's shot up anything like the properties in Shad Thames have shot up, she's probably going to be all right. But it's a nice Tegan's theme as well. The music is very good. It's one of the more notable sort of bits. And I like the fact she sort of comes back, because I felt at the time that the suggestion was there that she might have changed her mind, but missed too late, because the Doctor doesn't hang about. You think he might have gone, yeah, tell her, let's just get out thermos and a cup of tea and sit here for 15 minutes in case she changes her mind. But no. Okay, you're going? Okay, fine, bye. And yes, Roger Davenport, playing Trooper, gets several different bits there where he's the Trooper in different places, but he too gets killed in one of those corridor gunfights. So they all go. So it's quite a death fest. But I remember, as a kid thinking that seemed very grown up. This was like Aliens. This was like the big sci-fi adventures or disaster movie films and all of those that did the stuff that Doctor Who didn't do or couldn't do. So I can see why Eric Saward decided to sort of push this kind of atmosphere for season 22, and for having done Earthshock and having done Resurrection, and I think they were the stories that sort of floated his boat, and that the fans liked. I think Resurrection even beat Caves of Androzani, did it in the DWM series poll that year. Whereas Caves is obviously now one of considered to be one of the best stories of all time, and I don't think Resurrection is even close. So it's one of those stories that I think relies on its shock value first time, and probably is one of diminishing resources, diminishing returns once you've got over the initial wham bam thank you ma'am. It's I can see why people might think it's slightly it piles on unnecessary bits of plot. It is a bit sort of macho and soulless and humorless. But I quite like that cynical feel. I quite like the fact that nobody makes it out alive, even though Warriors of the Deep had pretty much done that. You could see that Warriors of the Deep is kind of, Saward would have liked it to have been a bit like Resurrection of the Daleks, but Warriors of the Deep is a similar sort of story. Everyone gets killed in that, but that looks much more like a not very good Doctor Who story. There's lots I love about Warriors of the Deep, but it is it's trying to be what Resurrection of the Daleks actually is, and so I like Resurrection. The kid in me wanted Doctor Who to be grown up. I wanted it to be the sort of thing my friends who were watching sort of more violent stuff, or were much more into stuff that had gun battles and fighting and all of that sort of thing. I wanted it to be all of that, and it's got good characters, which I like. It's got good actors doing good work. I think it is very well directed. A lot of the big moments don't actually go anywhere. The destruction of Gallifrey, the Doctor going in to kill Davros, but it does give it dramatic beats. And yes, the ending to episode 3. This is how I'm getting old and senior. Going, I wonder where the ending to episode 3 is. It was where I said it was on what I was saying was it was a cobbled together version. It's just that I'm watching the 50-minute version. And I knew that. I mean, I introduced it saying that. And yet I still, halfway through, to be fair, I am having to talk and watch at the same time. Anyway, so 2 things from this episode. And then 1 thing overall, isn't it? So, well, I like the I'm going to kill Davros and that face off. I like the Doctor saying that he's going to do it, and the companion's reaction of, oh my God, but you don't do that. I think it's very well played. I think it hits as dramatically as it's intended to, and it steps the story up a notch, instead of the Doctor and co being sort of passive players, caught up in the whirlwind of what's happening to everybody else. Suddenly the Doctor's being proactive in a way that's making him perhaps cross a moral line, and I think that is interesting. And then the face-off between him and Davros, I think is very interestingly written. I like the fact that Davros doesn't try and beg for his life, but kind of is cunning and manipulative, but also points out the conflicting logic in the Doctor's own morality, and owns his own. And Terry Malloy does that well, but I think Davison is excellent. Davison really carries off the I'm doing this, and it's about as close to the line as I've ever got, and I really feel the impact of that. So yeah, the Doctor deciding to kill Davros, which he doesn't do, so we're having our cake and eating it, which is perfect. And you could say, well, he never would have done it, but he tried, and perhaps he doesn't have that kind of braveness and has to do something else instead, or perhaps it's that you should just never kill. I think you can impose your own feeling upon it, but we get the moment, and he doesn't have to go through with it, and that's perfect for the setup of the show, and for the story. And the second thing, I think Tegan's leaving scene is good. It genuinely feels not like, oh, we're just a little bit sad. It feels like pretty grim. No, this has been hard. There is a consequence to these adventures, a real psychological consequence for an ordinary person, and sometimes you just have to tear yourself away and go. And she does, and we never see her again. Well, in fact, we did see her again very recently, as I record this, the latest episode of Doctor Who to be broadcast. Oh, who'd have thought all that time later? Never thought Janet Fielding would return when she wasn't even going to do Big Finish at one point. And she's great, and I do like Tegan. I do like her. I do like her outfits, sort of tie-dye explosions and leather skirts. Oh, I do like that bit where the policeman kill the man. Oh, well, that might be my bonus thing as well. So yeah, Tegan's departure and the Doctor killing Davros or not are my two things for that episode. And then I think my favourite thing overall is the fact that it's got a killer policeman in it, because I think they make for some really memorable scenes. Two uncredited extras as well, Mike Braben and Mike Jeffries, I think they're called. And it just, they're menacing. I love that final shot where Lytton joins them and they just sort of go off and walk. I love the fact that they have silencers. That makes it even a bit creepier. And just, I love the fact that they don't chase her as well. They don't chase Tegan. There's that sort of inexorable thing. And they become slightly comedic figures for the last time we see them in episode 2 of Attack of the Cybermen. No, it's just they're only in episode 1 actually. Oh no, then we see them being converted, don't we? But for that last bit, there's a bit of that comic stuff with the put your hands up and the handcuffing, and they suddenly become they're much better as enigmatic sort of backgroundy presences, and that to me is the. I'd have probably chosen the design if Ed hadn't already chosen it for part 1, maybe, and the sort of grim atmosphere, Saward Robinson combo thing that I chose for episode 1 did take a lot of good things away. So I'm having to grasp at straws here because, well, no, I'm not grasping at straws. I think the murderous silent policeman speak to a lot of what the story is trying to do. I think Saward's trying to do something that the old production team got in trouble for. He's trying to mean that it ends on a sort of downbeat note rather than a cheerful one. And I think that's always good to shake the show up a bit and to do that, and to make it feel that victory is not entire and has come at a cost. But also it's the Yeti on your Lewin Tooting Beck thing, isn't it? It's the making something every day scary, and I think and with great economy, 2 actors in policeman's uniform. Anything that's something you can get from stock that Doctor Who manages to make really terrifying, I think is the perfect use of the show's format and possibilities. If you can just get something out of a cupboard and make it deadly, I think you're doing Doctor Who properly. So the fact that Lytton and his chums are coppers, I think will be my bonus thing. So let's see what Ed Stradling has chosen for his 2 things from episode 2 and his bonus thing for the whole story.
So we'll move forward to part 2, and the other thing I like about it, and this might sound slightly strange to think of a positive, which is that pretty much everyone dies. Now, I'm not particularly a fan of people dying in the dramas I watch, but I am a fan of people dying in the dramas I watch when it's about Earth being attacked by all-powerful Dalek creatures who can wipe out large numbers of human beings at a stroke, because everyone dying is what would happen in a serious situation like this. Of course it would, and the nobody dies or everybody lives should be the exception rather than the rule when you're taking your friends on a deadly dangerous tour around the universe. And throughout the whole story, really, there is a real threat of death hanging over everyone, and you can feel it. And also, because of what happened to Adric a couple of years previously, we now know that it could happen to Tegan, for example, or Turlo, who are in, again, you feel they're both in trouble, and they're alone as well for very long parts of the serial. They're alone and they're in trouble, and we're worried about them. The other thing was, I knew, because I wasn't a fan, I wasn't reading Doctor Who magazine, I was just watching and enjoying it. I knew Davison was leaving, but I didn't know when, so he could be going at any time. So this made it even more scary and frightening for me, because it could be the Doctor's last story. This could be the one where the Daleks kill him, and I didn't know. It wasn't until I saw in the Radio Times that it said introducing Colin Baker. That's when I knew, oh, it's this one that he's leaving, and I didn't know until then. So that was another thing which kind of made me slightly, fearful of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's very well put from Ed. And actually, if I thought about it properly, no, I really like the Davison saying, "I'm going to kill Davos," because I'm assuming he's going to choose Tegan as the last thing. I could be wrong, but I just get the sense of that. But maybe I should have chosen as my bonus the fact that nearly everybody dies, because it did make it feel very grown up to me. Again, why, when I was a kid, did I want to feel grown up? All I want to do now, as I head towards 50. I was talking to Shez earlier today, and we realised that our dog Bernard is about to become 5, and we're both about to become 50. And she went, God, that means we've had him for a tenth of our lives. And I suddenly felt very small and short-lived. And I said, I don't want to die. Because as you get older, what is it? Life is wasted on the living, says the master in the TV movie. Childhood is wasted on children. Of course, hindsight is 20/20, and you always appreciate what you had if you don't have it anymore. But the amount of time one spends fretting on the things one shouldn't fret on, I was quite a sort of scared child. I think I was worried about getting into trouble. I was worried about the future. I was worried about all sorts. And now I think, if only you'd enjoyed it a bit more. And maybe I think I enjoyed it less than I actually did, because I remember, moments of great excitement, largely, when I'd dived into a Doctor Who book or was looking forward to a Doctor Who thing. So I did have islands of solace, and they were all Doctor Who. They all had Doctor Who coconuts on them. I'm really not very good at metaphors, but I do look back, but perhaps that's the mistake I'm making. I'm looking back with regret rather than not worrying about that and concentrating on the here and now. But I did, as a kid, I was desperate for Doctor Who to be adult and to be grown up, and I think I was desperate to be grown up because it seemed to me that when you're grown up, that's when your troubles went away. Nobody could tell you off. Nobody could bully you. Nobody could tell you what to do. You seemed pretty cool and world-wise and everything. You understood everything. And of course, I mean, because I think I've said this before, my brother's 6 years older than me, and I remember thinking, all I've got to do is get to 18 when I was 12, get to 18 like he is, and I'll be fine. And of course, you look at 18-year-olds now and you go, they don't know anything, they're children. But I was desperate for people to think my show was big and grown up and adult, and again, this sort of explains, I think, why Saward went that way with the show. It was an instinct and a decision I was perfectly happy with in many ways. That was the stuff I liked about Doctor Who at the time. I can see now, as part of the whole sort of makeup of Doctor Who, and I have very good friends whose opinions I totally believe in and follow and buy, and who absolutely hate that period of the show and think that season 22 in particular is the greatest aberration in the show's history, because it takes it from being fantastical and cozy and comfortable, and that's not in a pejorative way. Cozy and comfortable is how I've found season 2 on my recent sort of revisit when the Blue-Grey came out, and I adored it. And the Pertwee era, the bits that I thought were shortcomings about the show, I now absolutely embrace and adore. I still like season 22 as well. I'm in a kind of liking everything mode these days, because maybe I'm getting old and trying to stop worrying, and I've realised I'm only headed in one direction, so I may as well smile as I'm heading that way. Certainly about things that aren't real, do you know what I mean, and out of my control, because they're all from the olden days in the past. So I may as well let them stand on their own 2 feet. But yeah, I can understand those people who reject the sort of Saward model of what Doctor Who should of what Doctor Who should be. And I certainly think, actually, as I say, from speaking to him, and that slightly odd defence that he has, well, it's violent situation, so you're going to have to react violently. No, if you're somebody else, I think one of the keys to the Doctor is and I know he nearly brains a caveman in the very first story, and I know he disintegrates an Ogron, but generally, I think the thrust of the character seems to be that if he can avoid bloodshed, he will. Whereas Saward would have had him shooting a guard in cold blood, So, I think there is a sort of misunderstanding of the character there. A misunderstanding of the tone of the show by having it so grim and gritty and violent comparatively. Well, I don't know, because as I say, as a kid, I lapped that up. And as a kid, this was the most exciting bit of Doctor Who. This and Caves were the highlights. I was much more into that than I was into, men in shorts walking around a sandy planet, or the sort of slow wander around, monsters and people standing 5 foot away from each other in one wide shot on a brightly lit underground base set, pointing torches at each other. I was much more when it was trying to be Peck and Pa. That's what I was after, because I suppose I was starting to watch and be exposed to sort of grown-up films. My brothers would bring back films that were, or we'd see, stay up later. We were always allowed to watch sort of adult, for want of a better word, content. I mean, I'm talking like grown up movies. I'm not talking about they weren't sticking on Debbie Does Dallas. I've never seen Debbie Does Dallas. Whenever Shirley Lee says what do you want to watch at home, I always go Debbie Does Dallas. I think one day it would be quite funny if I actually got it as a joke, but I don't know if it's is it a really naughty film? I think I don't want. I'm not gonna. But she said one day she said one day I'm gonna call your bluff and get it for you. And I thought one day I'll call her bluff and I'll get it for her. But I don't know. But I'm presuming it's a proper, not like a Confessions of a Window Cleaner, which is has naughty bits in, but they're not ready for action, and no actual action occurs between the players. But is Debbie Does Dallas? Why am I talking about Debbie Does Dallas? I can't remember. But anyway, it is a joke in our house that's gone on for far too long and is probably really boring. But whenever she says, what should we watch? I go, Debbie Does Dallas. But I don't actually know what. I've never actually seen Debbie Does Dallas. Have any of the viewers and listeners to Happy Times and Places, have you ever been taken to a happy time or a place like Dallas when Debbie's doing it? I hope. Do I hope you haven't? Well, I don't know. People could do what they want. But anyway, this is not the Debbie Does Dallas podcast. Could you imagine doing a podcast like this on a porn movie? Well, my favourite thing about that was when he did that on her face. Oh no, I can't believe I even said that. Well, there we go. Let's leave that there, because it's not really my cup of tea. I'm much more of a I'm much more of a children's television program man myself. Anyway, so because it's not really let's not get into why all that's not really my cup of tea, but on my brief bits of exposure, I just think they should. It's a bit Saward, and people aren't very nice to each other. And I think with most of the things they get up to in those sorts of films, they should be very nice to each other indeed. But anyway, let's get on to before I give you my very naive guide to naughty movies. Anyway, Ed Stradling's second favourite. So I can understand the death and the fact that everyone dies being one of the most attractive things about it. I err that way as well, but I can also totally understand why that makes some people who like sort of crazy, daft, imaginative, fun Doctor Who might find that that leaves a nasty taste in their mouth, and it's not what they come to the show for. So, both of those things. Right, Ed.
And the other thing I'll talk about is the departure of Tegan, because when she leaves, again, it's a bit more real. She's pissed off. She's seen all these nice people die. You can believe that this is the one where she thought, oh my God, this is the reality of what I'm doing, travelling around with this guy. I'm just watching people die all the time. It's almost like I didn't really believe this was true in the previous 25 serials that I've been in, because, it didn't seem quite so real. This one seemed real, and that's why I'm going. And it almost feels like that to me, watching it. Seen lots of good people die, very lucky not to die herself. Normally the companion sees all those deaths, and the next following Saturday we've forgotten all about it, and then we wonder why no girls watched Doctor Who in 1984. It's different this time. She knows that the Doctor didn't want that, and so she's conflicted, and it's not a happy goodbye, but she decides that it's over. And I again think that's kind of a bit more believable than we saw in most Doctor Who companions' departures, and for me was more moving as a result of that. Others might feel differently, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good choice, because it's my choice. And yes, the fact that it is more believable than the usual companion exit, it does seem a little bit hurried, but they make a virtue of the hurriedness. It's her making a snap decision based on the fact that it's one of those Doctor Who stories in which everybody dies. She could have left at the Awakening and got stayed with her grandfather, couldn't she? She thought, no, I'll wait until I'm miles away from any relatives, and I've left the scene of a crime. Who did the cleanup of that? Her forensics going to be all over it as well. Anyway, so a lot of bodies to dispose of by the British authorities. I think nowadays you'd probably, blow that building up so at least the corpses would be incinerated. But that's just kind of left for somebody to clear up. I suppose a unit would do it, and it would be Official Secrets Act and all of that. But yes, the nature of it, it makes a virtue of some of the necessary compromises that the format imposes upon a companion exit, a regular's exit, and does it very well. Unlike Ed, I knew Tegan was leaving, but I remember being quite surprised as we got to the end and she hadn't sort of shown a sign of doing so, because I'd got the Radio Times 20th anniversary. Did that say when Tegan and Turner were going to leave? Something, I think. I knew that when both of the companions were going to leave, and I knew that the Doctor was going in caves. So I was ahead of Ed. I wasn't a regular purchaser of Doctor Who magazine, because we lived out in the middle of nowhere, and you got a copy every now and again if you were lucky, or if somebody gave me one or whatever. But I did have the Radio Times 20th anniversary special, one of the greatest pieces of Doctor Who merchandise ever produced, that and Doctor Who: A Celebration. I very much credit with making me a Doctor Who fan. I read them over and over and over again. Wonderful things, beautifully illustrated, and just a door to Narnia. And I think it was in that it told me when Tegan and Turlough were leaving, but if not, something else at around that time. So I knew she was going, and I knew, unlike Ed, that the Doctor was going to survive this. But you could see why you might not. You could see why you thought he might regenerate. I mean, he's even lying down, on the couch. It's a perfect place to regenerate. So yeah, it feels like a really momentous story, even though the only really momentous thing that happens is that Tegan leaves. But it feels like a more important and more epic tale than everything else in that season, apart from Caves of Androzani. Even though it's not that dissimilar in terms of its ambitions of storytelling to Warriors of the Deep, which are both sort of high casualty action adventures. But it feels more epic and certainly more polished than that. And obviously it feels more dark and gritty than Planet of Fire or The Awakening. And Frontios is a curious beast that is entirely different. I'm a huge fan of Frontios. I was slightly nonplussed by it as a kid, but now I think it's one of the stronger Davison stories that's only really scuppered by the Tractators. I think they drag its reputation under a little bit. But anyway, we will do Frontiers. I've got a lovely guest doing Frontiers. He hasn't recorded it yet, though. Paul Scoons from Down Under. But he's claimed it, and I look forward to what he has to say on it. But in the meantime, if you want to hear what I think of Frontiers, you can listen to Joe Ford's Hamster with a Blunt Penknife. I think the first one I did with him was Frontiers, and that's a lovely podcast hosted by a lovely man. And I've just done a 3-part interview with him. Why anybody would want to listen to that, I've no idea, but it's available should you be a masochist or need a cure for insomnia. Now, Ed, he says to the people who are listening to this, which is currently an hour and 20 minutes long. So, Ed's final thing, his bonus thing to cover the whole story, my policeman thing, I think it was probably going to go nowhere. I think for my bonus, I should have chosen Everybody Died, and I'd have got a point there, because actually I've got 2 points. Hang on, I got a point for Tegan. I got a point for episode 1, the grimness and all of that. So actually, if he does choose the policeman, I have won. I'm not going to win, am I? I'm not going to win. Oh, if I'd known it had been this close, I would have perhaps thought better, or would I? Who knows?
And I also have to choose a bonus item, which is not related to any of the episodes, and that's going to be for the regular cast, the 3 regulars, who I think are terrific throughout their time together, actually. I mean, I don't know how many serials they did, just the 3 of them. I suppose it would have been starting from Enlightenment through to this one. All of the serials that they're in, they give, consistently believable performances. I'm not suggesting that it was the greatest, doctor-companion relationship as written. I don't think it was particularly. But I think in terms of consistency of performance, those 3 were really very good pretty much all the time. I found their performance consistently convincing. Strixon has a kind of real slightly understated, you never quite know whether he's enjoying himself or not. Janet Fielding as Tegan, I think her performance generally is a bit underrated over the years that she was in the show, and I think again the dynamic between the 3 of them worked pretty well in that they are kind of slightly cranky with each other. That's how people behave when they become very familiar with each other. So that's my bonus point is for the 3 regulars, who I think were terrific.
Yeah, I buy that. I think that's a flaw of what I do when I do these is that I kind of sorry, that was my music playing on to the next track, which is Dominic Glynn's Doctor Who remixes was the next track along in my music library after Ed. So anyway, I think that's a good choice, and I mean I think I kind of acknowledged Davison in the whole Davros confrontation thing. I think that the reason it is as successful as it is he is a big part of that, the main part of that, the essential part of that. And I mentioned I don't think he ever has even a duff moment, let alone a duff story or scene as the Doctor. But I think Ed's quite right. I think Janet Fielding does take a while to get right, and I think she's slightly overwrought occasionally in some of her earlier performances, or her overwrougtness is not contained enough to be convincing performance-wise. It could be slightly awkward in places, and again, that's partially because of the restrictions of the way this stuff is filmed and the pros arts nature of multi-camera, etc., etc. But I think by this point, I mean, and earlier than this point, but by this point, she's regularly knocking it out of the park. And I loved Tegan as a kid, and I like the fact that there's an edge to her. I agree, and actually, what he talks about with the dynamic, again, it's a bit like the violent stories with guns and gruesome deaths that he totally piles on Eric Saward, next season. Kind of, the Doctor and Perry always arguing with each other is kind of taking the crankiness that Ed celebrates here as being refreshingly real. That it's not all sweetness and light, and that there's a bit of an edge to everybody's discourse and interaction, which can make it realistic, and which makes the dynamic perhaps easier to be engaged by, and then goes too far with it, because I think occasionally you want the Doctor and Perry to stop arguing, and actually a lot of their arguments are sort of quite childish in the writing as well, whereas the edge here does seem an attempt to make it a bit more sort of palatable to a more cynical grown-up audience, and again, that kind of appeals when you're a kid, and sort of when you're an eavesdropping adult. And Mark Strickson is great, and yes, that shifty quality that he has, that he's always pretty tense, he's always on edge. As I say, even that sort of I'm going to get my face on the camera thing does mean that he's sort of always alert and looking backwards, and it helps to keep the pace and keep the atmosphere and keep everything sort of edgy and dangerous. And I think yeah. So the three regulars do their different jobs very, very well, but work as a cohesive whole dynamic, and they're all very good. Again, I don't think any of them have a bad moment this season at all. And yeah, good choice, Ed. And I wish sometimes I could see the some of the staples of the show more clearly than trying to sort of drill into the sort of minutiae, and forget the bigger picture sometimes, because of course these shows would not have been successful at all were it not that some of the week in, week out staples, and particularly the main cast, were not so compelling and watchable, because if you're not with them, it makes tuning every week a bit of a chore, and it never was. Even though Davison was not my favourite Doctor at all as a kid, I keep saying this, probably in my top three now, I would say. So there's something for coming back to this stuff and reappraising it. So yeah, it is a story that I enjoy a lot. Resurrection of the Daleks, Sunday afternoon disaster movie kind of thing. I was brought up on the Poseidon Adventure and the Towering Inferno. Great big ensemble casts of characters, slowly but surely getting killed off one by one. So when Doctor Who did that, I was all for it. It's not going to win any awards for original plot or subtle metaphor or complex psychology, but I think it does what it sets out to do very well. I think Matthew Robinson does a terrific job of directing it. It's ambitious, and actually a lot of the stuff that he does, although he's sort of big bells and whistles and bangs and explosions, the fluidity of his camera work and the way that he works around some of those sets, and John Anderson's set design, which is superb, are all very strong. And it's got I think it has a feel all of its own, partially because it's in 2 feature-length episodes. It just makes it feel like it's it's something big and hefty, and epic, even though it's, the same length as any other Doctor Who story of around that time. So it hasn't stopped being fun, watching Resurrection of the Daleks, and it will never stop being fun, being a friend of Ed Stradling, who is a good guy, who I like very much. And it was nice to hear his voice there because, I don't get to speak to him often enough. So hello, Ed. Thanks for doing it. I'm glad you're my friend, and I hope you've enjoyed having his voice in your ears as well, because, it's always nice to have a bit of Ed Stradling involved in your Doctor Who shenanigans. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and that you will join me once again next time that I attempt to watch some Doctor Who in happy times and places. Ta-ta. Well, thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest this time around was Ed Stradling, who can be found on Twitter or X under @EdStradling. I'm grateful to Ed and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Stephen Moffat. It's not that Stephen Moffat, by the way. It's a different Stephen Moffat. And Ruben Herfindahl and Sydney Wilson. It's not that Sydney Wilson either. David James Wilson, Andrew Wilson, Andrew Willis, Rhys Williams, Michael Williams, Tom White, Stephen White, Adam Westwood, Gary Wales, Apollo C. Vermouth, Sabrina Tirabassi, Damien Timmer, Nick Temple, Neil Tate, Stephen, David Shepherdson, Graham Slate, Keith Say, Jim Sangster, Mark Sandham, John Rivers, Dylan Rees, Scott Pride, Kevin Parker, Jonathan Potter, Melvin Pena, Dave Owen, Graham Knott, Matthew Newton and Christopher Newman. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. All of those people and more are kind enough to sign up to patreon.com/Toby Haydock. And for that, they don't just get their names read out, they get advance releases, they get bonus material, they get pictures of my dog every Tuesday, they get monthly AMAs, which is questions and answers just for patrons. There are other bits and bobs. There are trinkets to lure you up the tiers as well, but all of the actual audio and video and photographic content is available at the lowest tier, which is just £3 a month. And with that tier, as with every other tier, if you pay for a year in advance, you get 10% off that as well. That is at patreon.com/Toby Haydock. It's a really good system, and I reply to any messages I get on there, and there's little bits of chitter-chatter after I've done a release, and everybody gets on, and it's all very nice. So it's a nice place to be, and as I say, there are other bits and bobs, and you definitely get these Happy Times and Places a good 6 months ahead of everybody else. And the Too Much Informations and Indefinable Magics at least a month before everybody else. And you also get some of my work in progress stuff and little bits and bobs like that. That's at patreon.com/Toby Haydock. There's also a system that has no required sign up. You don't get any of the bonuses, called kofi.com/Toby Haydock, where you can just chuck me a few quid if you've particularly enjoyed this week's podcast, or if I sound particularly needy or hungry, or if you've just won the lottery, but you still don't want to tie yourself to me on a month-by-month basis. It feels weird doing this, but it seems to be the way that we do things these days, and it certainly enables me to take the time off to record these properly and to use decent equipment and edit them nicely, etc. So patreon.com/Toby Haydock, kofi.com/Toby Haydock. But if you cannot afford to do that or don't wish to, which is perfectly understandable, it's no obligation, and these things do come out eventually, what you could do, though, which would be really nice, is to go to iTunes and anywhere else you get your podcasts and to give these a 5-star rating and to perhaps write a few lines of positive criticism. Yeah, positive, criticism can be positive. Positive feedback, though. Let's get the word criticism out of there. I can't take it. I mean, if you want to chat to me about it, that's absolutely fine. But, if you've got something, if you haven't got anything nice to say out there, just don't. Put your energies into something else. Save a dog. Kiss a child. Only one of yours. So, yes, 5-star reviews and positive feedback really helps, because you know what the internet's like. The more you give something good stars and enable them to look good to passing punters, the better it is for us all. And by us all, I mean me. And who is me? Well, I am Toby, and I am on Twitter at Toby Haydock. I've got a Facebook fan page, it's called, I think, or just a page where you can follow the sort of work stuff that I do, the comedy. I have a regular comedy night in Manchester on a Tuesday and once a month on a Sunday, and I'm round about other places as well, although I'm tending just to do my regular gigs at the moment because I've got lots of other things to do. But you can follow where I'm at and what I'm doing, and if I've got something on the radio or, doing an acting job here or there. If you're interested, basically, you can go to my Facebook just Facebook page. Let's just call it Facebook page. I don't have fans, but you might be interested in what I do. I'm interested in, I'm interested in how my courgettes are growing, but I'm not a fan of them. But I don't want them to die. But I'm not. I wouldn't want, I wouldn't get their autograph, or anything like that. So let's get that fan word out of the way. And I also am on Instagram, trying to build that. I've learnt to do videos recently, and I think I'm doing a decent job, mostly related to the comedy club, showing who's on. We get surprise appearances by people like Sarah Millican and Joe Lycett and all of that. So that's at toby.haydock on Instagram. I haven't quite cracked Instagram yet. I see those people opening their post or pouting next to something they've been given, or showing their nails, and they seem to be doing far better than me. So let's see if I can do well without a nail in sight, false or otherwise. That's toby.haydock on Instagram. Oh, and these podcasts have their own Twitter feed at Haydock Podcast. Now, by a lovely coincidence, Joe Ford's podcast, Hamster with a Blunt Penknife, is, as I'm recording these little bits of this podcast, has just released the second part of his Resurrection of the Daleks commentary that he does with a fantastic guest contributor. If you don't know Joe's podcast, Joe, lovely, affable Joe, does a commentary alongside a special guest, and they talk about it together, and they, do what all good commentaries do. They take in, memories of when stories were first on, and they're very personal, of course, depending on who the guest is. Well, the guest is Paul Quinn talking about Resurrection of the Daleks, and it's a great antidote to this one because he hates it, but it's no empty sort of slanging fest at all. He's got very sound reasons that he explains why Resurrection of the Daleks is the sort of the beginning of Doctor Who's death knell, and a fork to an incorrect path for Doctor Who to take, and he articulates it very well. And there's no particular venom there, but there is very well thought out and argued and reasoned and entertaining, because Joe is a great host, and the rapport between the two of them is. It's a bouncy conversation rather than a stuttering monologue, which you may be familiar with if you have sampled my oeuvre more than for about 10 seconds. But I was very interested. I was listening to it today because I've been pottering around the house, filling holes in walls and doing a bit of touching up paint work and all those sorts of things that I've been meaning to do for years, and I've decided I must do before I die. So I've done. Oh, and I've just seen some more in this room. Yeah, I've got some touching up of the house to do. So what better to do than to listen to a Doctor Who podcast? So, but walk your dog, go to the shops on your way to work. If you want to hear more Resurrection of the Daleks, Joe Ford and Paul Quinn, having a very I say I like Resurrection very much, and it is a guilty pleasure, but I didn't disagree with anything Paul says, and I really like that when I can hear a point of view that completely, very well argues something that I would think is contrary to my point of view, and I go, well, yeah, I mean, I can't argue with you there, but I still like it because of this, that, and the other. But all the points he makes are very, very good. So if you're not resurrectioned out, go and listen to all those good people dying once again. And then come back, because otherwise I will miss you.